Hi everyone. Welcome to Voice of Healthcare Presents The Big Idea, voicing what's next in healthcare. The Big Idea is Voice of Healthcare's newest virtual mini interview series that features leaders and visionaries from all the walks of healthcare in a one-on-one Q&A style. The breezy, snackable 20-minute show is a quick, refreshing dip for those who want to stay all updated on all newsworthy content and developments in healthcare. In this series, our eminent guests will empower you with expert insights on disruptions, practices, and trends that are worth exploring and worth sharing. For this episode, our guest today is Dr. Geetha Manjunath, who is the founder, CEO, and CTO of Niramai Health Analytics and has led the company to develop a breakthrough AI solution for detecting early stage breast cancer in a non invasive radiation free manner. In this conversation, we'll be talking about the novel cancer screening solution that Niramai has developed, and also how the early stage cancer detection technology is impacting the lives of millions of people all around the world. But before that, welcome Dr. Manjunath for this session. It's a pleasure to have you. Now, moving on to the next set of questions. To start with, Dr. Manjunath, you have been a member of CDAC team, worked with HP Laboratories as well as other MNCs. Could you please let us know the reason what led you to develop Niramaya? Over to you.
Sure. Like I mentioned, it's really a pleasure to be on this platform. Thank you so much, Voice of Healthcare, for featuring me. I always describe myself as an accidental entrepreneur. Yes, as you mentioned, I was at CDAC, Hewlett Packard, Xerox, and I was like a settled corporate technical innovator. Very happy with what I was doing, trying to create new innovations along with my team. Um, you know, for the world, solving some really important problems in the world. Um, but something happened in my close family circle that changed my mind. That is, one of my cousin sisters, Bharti, got detected with breast cancer way back 6 years, 7 years back. And she was just about 40 years around that age. And within few months, she was not with us. So it's a very, very late stage detection. And I discussed with the doctors and figured out that early detection is very, very important to save lives from breast cancer. So that was a starting point. I started looking at, how and what can be done to save lives from breast cancer. Because she was so close to me, I had an emotional connect. And I also saw how the family got disrupted because of the death, small boy whose education got disrupted, and so on. So this was definitely the reason why I started looking at this problem. After about 1 year of doing this as a part of an exploratory activity, I decided to quit my job and do Niramai full time. A couple of my team members joined me on this journey as well. It's been a fulfilling 5.5 years of journey. I've never regretted even a single day. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Geeta, for letting us take through this memory lane and sharing your experiences of the journey of Niramai with us. Next on, we'd like to know what are the challenges you faced during the early time and the ones you face now in your entrepreneurial journey, and how have these contributed to your company as well as your entrepreneurial growth?
Yeah, of course, when I jumped off from my previous company to do this, of course, I had developed a lot of innovative products. So product development was not a big, concern for me. Having said that, of course, it's a new product. It has to be used on the ground. Nobody ever had ever tried, analysis on thermal images for breast cancer in a very serious field mode. There were other comments on the web from even US FDA warning people not to use just thermal imaging. So all of these basically meant, that we had to be, first of all, very scientific and honest and transparent about what we are developing. we are not here to take away lives, right? If we develop something, it has to help and it should not hurt anybody, right? So developing a product which is usable on the ground on people who walk in and take the test is actually much harder than developing a prototype and publishing papers and saying this is new, and or even developing something for, let's say, e-commerce or education, or because the cost of an error here is so much more costlier and so much more impactful that we have to be very careful. It's almost like walking on a thin rope, right? Because if you call somebody who's not cancerous as a cancer patient, then of course she can actually go through a follow-up, test, and she can figure out. But still, there's a psychological disturbance, so you need to keep that to the minimum. On the other hand, if you miss a person who is cancerous, then also it's kind of almost costing the life, right? So we have to be very clear and conscious about the decisions, as accurate as possible, at least better accuracy than currently available techniques was something that we always wanted to do. So this gave us a lot of technical challenges as well. And also to start with, where you would get the data, because thermal imaging was not so very common. So working with the hospitals, finding like-minded research partners from a medical field as well, so that we can move on this journey, collect all the data, build the models, test it in a realistic scenario. I think that was one big set of challenges. Second big set of challenges initially was also about raising funds, but thankfully we did get good investors who believed in the idea, believed in us as a team, and invested in us much earlier on. And that helped us accelerate our initial explorations and experiments in the right direction. Once we had these initial prototype working, the next challenge was really about getting doctors and hospitals to accept and provide the solution to the end user. There again, of course, we had to go through grilling clinical studies. And I'm very thankful to HCG, Narayana Hridayalaya, Max Hospital, BMS Hospital. All of these have been very open without hurting their patients, ensuring in a way that it is initially used only as a back-end testing tool, and then later, once validated only, it was actually offered to the end user. So this was also very, very helpful. And also I've, first time I'm sharing, I did face a lot of problems in keeping leadership team, right? Because it's highly demotivating to be in the front line and hearing negatives all the time, right? You're on the right path, but people say there's so many naysayers, right? It will not work. People are not coming in. Initially, it's a new test, right? So it takes time to develop the trust. And the initial few years, I think after we completed the initial prototype and got the thing, even my co-founder left, and many other couple of leaders who joined in could not bear the front heat, right? It requires that patience and attitude to understand why they're saying no, and correct and look at it from a constructive standpoint and fix anything that needs to be fixed in the product or the team or the solution or the reporting, so that we can continue to do good to the patients and then. So, but of course, we do have an excellent team now of leadership team, as well as wonderful, passionate Niramai team members who have stayed along with me, and I'm happy to say that we have made an impact. More than 58,000 women have benefited from this test. The test is now installed in 120 plus locations in 25 cities in India. The hospitals are very comfortable offering this as the standalone test for breast cancer screening, because we have actually done clinical studies, very scientifically performed clinical studies published in peer-reviewed international journals, and also accepted, from a regulatory standpoint, not just in India, but also in Europe, all countries, and also we recently got a US FDA clearance as well. So it's been a very persuasive, consistently kind of, correcting and refining the product and so on the way. So, but it's been an excellent journey, and to just say in one word, when you really find that you've saved a life because of product, all your tires, all your efforts it feels fulfilled. Yeah.
Moving on, we have heard that Niramai has recently collaborated with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and many congratulations on that. Please share about this and other latest advancements that you're working on. And what's next for you?
Uh, sure. Actually, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have been supportive, since almost 3 years now. Way back in 2018, I think I met one of the senior leaders from ABMGF, and we presented breast cancer screening solution using thermalytics. That's the tech we call it as thermal analytics. And then he was actually very appreciative of the results. And then, but then he said there is one problem in tropical countries, what we call as neglected diseases, which is called onchocerciasis, river blindness, which is basically a skin parasite which sits behind some lumps, and if it kind of develops, it can go into the blood and cause blindness, called disability, and many times death. And 50 million people are affected in Africa and other countries similar to that. So and that is when we started experiment. Nobody he said, okay, can you just try thermalytics, if it works or not? And I thought, we read about the disease and I thought it may actually help, and so we started a small experimental project with them. They're funding with just 2 people working on it. And of course, during COVID, we had to do the testing in Africa. We had to train them in remotely and so on. So all that happened, and I'm glad to say, just last week I was there at Seattle presenting the project, and they're hugely, hugely appreciative of what we have developed, and they believe there is a breakthrough that's coming up in the detection and monitoring of drugs for river blindness. Because so far, the only way they could make out if a person is infected with this particular disease is by scraping off the skin and put it under the microscope, which is extremely invasive, and you cannot do it for every person, and that's what they were doing. And it was really inhuman, literally, to actually do skin snipping, that's what they call it, or nodulectomy, to remove the nodules and put it under the microscope. Now we have developed this non-invasive imaging method where you can just take a picture of the nodule, and we will tell whether there is an alive female worm under this nodule, which means that the drug has not yet made an effect. And if you could potentially monitor the level of infection as well, which is something that we believe can be explored much further. And they're very interested in funding our next project, where we will be developing this monitoring protocol for river blindness, which will help in creating drugs for this disease. And so it's a phenomenal, I think, contribution to this area, because without a non-invasive method, it was impossible to develop a proper drug, because even to see whether the drug is making an effect or not, you were cutting it off, right? You are taking off the nodule. So it was very, very difficult to develop proper drugs before. And everybody in the onco community is excited to see early results of thermal imaging and AI for river blindness. And on the same spirit, right, thermalytics can actually be used beyond breast cancer. It just gives us the confidence in 2 ways. One is that, yes, it has other applications beyond breast cancer. And secondly, to get accepted by a body such as Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, it generally, funds only simple screening programs and all that in India. But funding a full research program means that, it basically shows the strength of the Niramai team. And it's really international quality people and quality ideas that we have here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Geetha, for that. And moving on, the last segment of this discussion would be, last but not the least, the big idea question for you. Now, that would be, what would your recommendation be for the young entrepreneurs who are looking to branch out in the healthcare space?
Uh, First of all, you have to make sure that you really want to spend quite a number of years on that problem, right? It's really not something that a startup you will do for a few months, 1 or 2 years, and then say, okay, done, I made a quick money and move on, right? It's really not that. You really are on this for like a long haul thing, right? You really have to be committed for a long time to solve the problem. And trust me, it's extremely fulfilling, and you'll definitely do it if you're there. So the persistence and consistent, tireless work is absolutely needed, and be ready for it. Secondly, that's one quality that I think that's one prominent quality that is needed. And of course, you will not know everything. A person who is open to feedback, understanding which feedback is the right one, which is not, making the right decision. Of course, not swaying away for every feedback, but taking feedback in a very constructive fashion, and determining the future roadmap is also very, very important. And from an advice standpoint, I would say that um, you don't have to know everything, but you need to be smart enough to understand, like I said, constructive feedback, and ask, understand whom to ask for what kind of questions, right? Who is the expert. And trust me, for healthcare particularly, ecosystem is extremely conducive, right? Because people are there to help you, people are there to guide you, right? As long as you are on the path, you're willing to put your efforts and 100% to 100% on it, there are people who will help you. So I think one is definitely make sure that you are in for a long haul. Second, try to be open, take constructive feedback, and always, third one, I would say, always keep the patient at the center of your problem. Money will come and go, definitely. If your product is doing the right thing, the rest will be aligned, right? So it's really about getting it right for the patient. Never ever lose focus on the patient while you're developing the product. Of course, for pitching the idea, there are lots of financial and economic benefits. You will have to, of course, give it to the provider, payer, and also investor. That definitely needs to be done. And for any good problem, you will find that alignment. Having said that, it's very important to keep the patient in this. Um, Another some advice I can give is, also you will have to take into account what is the current workflow. Understand how the problem is being solved in the current scheme of things. In one country, it may be different. Another country, it may be different. Try to understand that first, and then try to see, first of all, whether your idea and the solution is making sense, for that particular country, because this is a heavily regulated and country based regulated part. And secondly, try to figure out what is the minimally invasive, minimally disruptive way of entering into the current system. And then finally, maybe the right pathway can be used. Last but not the least, never underestimate the effort and money involved, and the importance needed for the clinical validation. The results have to be scientifically valid, be very truthful, because otherwise you're not keeping the patient in the center. So don't ever underestimate the value of clinical validation. And this is something I wish somebody would have told me before, though of course we started off in the first year itself, but I would have given a much more push to it in the first year itself, if I knew how important the clinical validation and publishing in international journals is to get create trust in your solution. And of course, never ever violate any regulatory for any country. So do the right thing, be on the right path. You'll definitely find so much fulfilling from a self happiness perspective, but definitely also, I'm sure, money is around the corner.
Thank you so much, Dr. Geeta. With this, we mark the conclusion of today's episode. Thank you so much again, Dr. Manjunath, for this interesting and insightful discussion. And thank you to our viewers as well. For more such content to know what's next in healthcare, please keep watching The Big Idea. Thank you.